Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of D6Wounds podcast. I'm very happy to be here with Mr. Mark Noffles Murfield and Dr. Luke Blacksall. Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening. How you doing?
Good evening.
Very well. So the agenda for today, we're gonna have a little chat about the upcoming busy calendar of events of Warhammer Fantasy for 2024 in light of the new release at the beginning of the year, and of course get into the London Legends GT being held on the 27th and 28th of April at the Dark Sphere Megastore in London. At the time of recording, there's still a few tickets available. I think there's 10 out of the 40 available. So if you're interested, check out the description below. I'll leave a link down there. Download the comp pack, check it out, send us an email, contact us on the Facebook or on YouTube, and get involved. So, guys,
I'm in the exciting news. This year, I'm actually going to be here for both of the days.
This is an added attraction. So get those 10 tickets fast.
Yeah, again, I completely forgot it was my son's birthday that weekend, but I've got a green light this time.
No ballet recitals.
Yeah. That was Box of Frogs.
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. It's good that we're not clashing with any other events this time. At least I don't think so.
Yeah, no, not.
So it's an exciting time to be in the hobby then, right? We've got a new game on the horizon. Can you feel the feeling of change in the air, that new things are happening? I feel like it's gone from sort of rumors and I suppose sort of arguments online about people's desires for the new game, and slowly it feels like the various different factions of Warhammer Fantasy players are coming together a little bit, and I think this new game is going to have a honeymoon period where everyone plays it and comes together. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's very likely. I think there'll be a lot of re-engagement. I think that because they've taken a quite complexity kind of heavy stance, with the exception of Magic, that probably a larger proportion of the players for this might be players who have played Warhammer Fantasy before, rather than completely new players. Or the new element will maybe, I think that's more unpredictable, but certainly the thing that I'm quite interested in is this almost feeling of like a kind of grand council of all of the Warhammer Fantasy players, present, past, and the Ninth Age people, all might re-engage at this point. And so, that might be quite interesting, as well as, of course, the element of the new.
I think it's just getting the bigger numbers together with BSB is what I'm looking forward to, just kind of that greater pool of players. I mean, they may not last, they may then rescatter again, but just for that brief period, it'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, there will be the experience probably of being able just to get games, wherever you live. And, we're all London based. And so we can, usually get games with some preparation. But of course, for many people who play Warhammer 8th edition, certainly like some of the people I met in North America, that's not a kind of a guaranteed thing at all. I mean, there might just not be players where you live. And when there'll be a supported game, there almost certainly will be. And so people will be able to, be able to enjoy a Warhammer game on their Friday or Saturday night or something like that, hopefully without huge amounts of scheduling. And that will be a really, really big change in, people's kind of wargaming lives if they're fans of Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah, I was speaking to an American guy who I think he commented on my YouTube channel, and he was sort of saying that his frustration at the time, 2015, 2016, where his friends were sort of stopping playing and they were moving to other games, and he was sort of like, guys, look, the game's not going to die if you carry on playing it. And it's just, you just got to make the decision to carry on playing it. And yet, for some reason, it's hard to kind of hold on because there's a kind of groupthink that takes over.
There is, especially on that whole mentality of, it's unsupported, so we can't play it anymore. And there even in London, there's that prevalence of that opinion. It's really strange.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we were talking about actually kind of off camera before this call. I mean, it's very, very interesting that for many people in the hobby, having a game which is kind of just simply sanctioned by Games Workshop, that's a really, really important thing. The fact that it feels live, I guess you've got kind of new releases, you've got kind of a narrative coming out of, the company at the top. Whereas I think for some players who are in a sense of, made their kind of peace with the past in a way, they're not that bothered about, whether Games Workshop are supporting it or not, so long as they can actually get games. And that's certainly kind of my feeling, about it. But, at the end of the day, one must recognize the ones in a minority in holding a view like that. And for many other people, it's very important for it to be a current and supported game. And, you know, that means there are going to be a lot more people playing. And that's, you know, got to be a good thing.
And I think it definitely looks like they're trying to get a good balance between the complexity and the simplicity, right? They're throwing out a lot of red meat for the existing, you know, 8th edition players who want a complex game, who want big units, and, you know, we've still got the same stat line, we've still got lots of models fighting, and you know, there's enough there so that everyone's going to get involved. And yet other elements of it, they're trying to simplify it, and perhaps that'll speed things up, perhaps that'll entice people to get into the game who perhaps were put off by having these big games that took a long time and had you know, really big hordes and things like that. So I think it's gonna work, at least initially.
Some of it's more complicated. It's not just being given red meat. We're almost being given, you know, steak tartare. I mean, with this kind of this pushbacks and all of the rest of it, and, you know, and this falling back in good order versus giving ground reluctantly. I mean, you know, this is a little bit of third ed coming back here with the pushback mechanic, and also the differences in formations as well, close order and open order. You know, some of that is more complex than before. The armor penetration being separate from strength, that's from the 9th age. That's also another element of complexity there. You've got, you know, for example, you could have high strength and low armor penetration, and low strength and high armor penetration. That's another kind of dynamic. And so some of it's more complex.
Yeah, and of course the lance formation is back.
Yeah, the old-fashioned lance as well. I don't know how that's going to work, but yeah, because the old triangle one.
It was convoluted in fifth. Yeah, it was.
I'm not sure it really worked that well in that. I'm not sure I played it right when we did play it, because it was kind of quite complicated to understand.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, but the complexity point is really interesting, because I thought it would be simplification across the board. And the only place where there is actually genuinely being simplification is in the magic system, where it's, you know, rolling 2d6 and beating a number like an Age of Sigmar. And I thought you were going to get the equivalent of that throughout all of the game. And it sort of only seems to be Magic where they're doing that too, which does seem a little bit incongruous. I'm not really sure why they decided to pick on Magic for the Age of Sigmar treatment. I think they've been listening to a lot of people who didn't like Magic in previous editions. And generally the people online who like the change to Magic are the same people who did not like Magic in 8th edition. And I think, and vice versa. And I think that's probably no coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, we're all big fans of 8th edition, and there'll be some things that I suppose inherently I've got a bias in that when something's radically different from that, I'm thinking, oh, is it going to work? But obviously the magic system is one thing, and the other big thing, which of course will annoy a lot of older gamers, is the base size changes. And at the risk of being a bore and having people sort of switch off and be like, don't go on about the bases, the fact that there has been one base size throughout all of the past editions of Warhammer, and now it's changing, I think gives me the right to sort of moan about it for a little bit longer, because you know, it is a big change, and it means that it's going to be awkward for using old models and, you know, having to rebase them or having to get all the spaces and stuff.
It'll be, I suppose it depends where you played. Like at the club, I suspect everyone at the club's just not going to bother rebasing, because we've all got God knows how many armies. You know, we've been playing as we are, and if we're all playing the same way, I can't see it's going to make too much difference. But if you're playing out and about, definitely. If you're going to tournaments, almost inevitably.
It also depends about the advantages and disadvantages of larger versus smaller bases. There are templates, so that's going to be one. Even though all of the front rank can swing, the stuff that's not in base-to-base contact only gets one attack. And so there is some degree of base-to-base which matters, although it's not as important as it was before.
I think
so. Therefore, you know, small bases is going to help you get more attacks where you have multiple attack dudes like Chaos Warriors and Sword Masters.
That's true, but if you're all playing on the same, you know, as is, it's not a huge advantage one way or another.
It'd be interesting to try and encourage a movement to stop anybody rebasing, and then we can all just play on the same, like just literally defy what Games Workshop are saying, and just play on the old kind of bases.
You probably just won't be able to use some of the newer models.
I think it's mainly an issue with kind of tournament play, I think, because they're going to have to enforce that after a while anyway. And that's going to be just incredibly irritating. And I like the idea very strongly of being able to play old editions with my new models. I'm not, just putting them on bigger bases and then never playing the old editions again. I mean, that's far too much of a final break from the past, and I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And did you notice on the latest release, the unicorn was on a 40 by 60 millimeter, which is actually slimmer, isn't it, than the current monstrous infantry base?
50 by
50 by 50.
Yeah. It's the same size that Thorgrim's on.
Yes, the Thorgrim's on. Yeah, yeah. But if it's actually slimmer than the current size, then, will you be forced to rebase then, or will you just take the hit of, if everyone agrees that it's a disadvantage to have a larger base, then I guess no one will mind.
Yeah.
Unless there is some advantage to having a bigger base.
You get a wider charge arc, but I don't think it's generally, when you have a larger base than you should have, no one is going to complain, because I think everyone realizes you modeled yourself to a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see what the early take-up old world tournaments are going to do next year on bases.
My understanding, I think, from what I know, is that they're not going to enforce that initially. I think there's just going to be a kind of a confusion kind of period where everyone works the game out, and which might be really exciting, actually. And, I mean, obviously, Simon, you were talking about a thing you're looking forward to about the old world. One of those things for me is from being in a very stable kind of meta where everyone knows what's good and what isn't. And occasionally someone does something that's a bit funky, but it's quite rare. Now we're going to be in something where no one will know what's good and what isn't until a critical mass of experience has been kind of reached. And I'm sure a lot of people will play a lot of games, and you'll get lots of stuff shared online, and people will be saying, oh, this is good and this isn't good, etc. And so maybe that, the meta might emerge quite quickly. But then, of course, it might also change as well, because if you get one thing that's really good and everyone picks it and it has some weaknesses, then obviously the thing that beats it comes, into fashion as well. It's only when you get something that sort of doesn't really have any weaknesses, like the equivalent of the Lion Star in 8th edition, which
I knew you were going to raise
doesn't really have any weaknesses. It's like a self-driving car. And so, at that point, but most things do have some weaknesses. So that whole shaking up of the kind of meta, and it couldn't be more extreme in this. We have a very stable meta versus then just literally thrown through the eye of terror into the realm of chaos. And well,
yeah, it's exciting. Yeah. And as just looking at the movement changes, the sort of shorter charge distances, having to count the wheel in your charge, I mean, that sort of changes everything in terms of how you're maneuvering your units. And it means that a very experienced player will still have a lot of a learning curve in terms of how they're going to take on that movement phase. Yeah,
they will have that. I mean, I'm not quite sure how that will factor things in. I mean, certainly I think the game will be there'll be less movement, certainly with infantry. And because I think if most troops are infantry, and infantry now have shorter charge distances and can't get long bomb charges, that will affect the game quite a lot. I think cavalry changes much less, because when you think about it, swift stride +8 is much closer to 16 inches, which it used to be doubled up, whereas infantry was transformational when they got their long charges. So now infantry have gone back to being a bit more like what they were before. Again, cavalry have stayed roughly the same. So cavalry are sort of now twice as fast as infantry again, most of the time, whereas in 8th they weren't. So I do think that's going to change things. And then, of course, you've got all of this pushback, which is, the pushback mechanic, which is all troops have got a certain form of steadfast now. And so you're going to have these combats continuing and continual pushes, and breaking and fleeing will be a bit rarer. And that will create, I do rather fear it might just create a kind of, cluster, a sort of clogging of the sort of center of the table, because troops, are always steadfast effectively. And you're just going to have combat. And so that is one of the most radical departures, that we've seen since the transition from 3rd ed to 4th edition, where, because in 3rd ed you had, being pushed back. You also had, if you pursued enemy in 3rd ed, you didn't kill them all. You sort of got free
hack, wasn't it? Yeah.
Free hacks. Exactly. So actually finishing off fleeing troops in 3rd ed was quite, as I understand it, was quite a protracted issue of, pursuing them and just like kind of, just killing them for much of the game. So that's going to really change the way the whole game feels on the table, I think. So yeah, I mean, and who knows how that's going to, the interactions there. It's very, very unpredictable. Although that hasn't stopped people, saying a lot about it.
The other big wild card, of course, is these PDF factions, and whether that's going to deter people from playing those armies at all, or whether just from day one it'll be like, okay, it's in a PDF, it's no big deal, it's still just as good as the other armies. I mean, it might just make a big difference or a small difference, we don't know. And there's a lot of speculation, and so it's kind of a lot of gaps in people's knowledge at the moment. We can only
I think that, I mean, I don't know. It depends whether they make the models for those PDF factions kind of available. And it seems as though they're not, initially focusing on them. So, I don't know. But there's a lot of really cool factions that aren't core factions. And you've got dark elves and demons that aren't in there. I mean,
vampire counts.
Yeah, and VC, exactly.
Skaven.
Yeah. So I don't know. What happens there. I think maybe they will get like a supported rule set of, within a couple of years. And I do think that one point that a few people have sometimes made in some against what sometimes I've said on my own YouTube videos, and I think this is a fair point, is, this is edition 1 of a new refreshing and iteration. You might get another edition in, say, 3 years' time, and maybe erratas as well. These things can change. It's not as though it's set in stone. And when you play Warhammer Fantasy for as long as we all have, 3 years isn't that long, really, is it? I mean, we can, in a sense, see it as greater than just the current edition. It's a bigger thing.
Or maybe it'll be like 40k and they'll change the rules in 3 months.
Maybe that would. I think if that happened, it would rather imply the rules were terrible.
Yeah.
And that would not be good.
I'm having a little dig there. I mean, I know 40k players who really like the fact that the rules keep up with the results and stuff, but I guess that's not for me.
I suppose it goes from one extreme to another. We're used to playing where you'd probably have like 5 years of an edition with no errata, or like minimal at the very least. They suddenly get what they want, and it's too much.
Yeah. So I think some people thought that, putting an errata or a patch on 8th edition would have actually been a very good idea. Like, actually, not just the FAQs, I mean, but actually changing some of the, like, for example, Purple Sun is clearly so much better than all of the other vortexes. And they clearly were
spells.
Yeah, and all the other spells. Even on the other vortexes, they were clearly backpedaling with all of them, like Curse of the Bad Moon and the what's the other one? The Nurgle one.
Yeah.
Onslaugh's Black Horror is still pretty good, but they were kind of backpedaling. And so in a sense, it almost might as well have just put like a sort of an errata out to say you can get a ward save against Purple Sun or something. And that would have automatically made it much, much worse. It would have still been an amazing spell, but that would have kind of helped. And they never did. And they never did this patching. And I guess now they probably might do that.
Yeah.
Because I think there'll be much more of a back and forth between the player base and GW, because we must remember now we're just playing in a more modern era where people are just more connected. There's just more fan reaction, more internet, more instant reaction, all of that kind of data.
And internet full stop compared to when we first started playing.
Yeah, exactly. In those days, there was no internet whatsoever. And there you go.
You'd write a letter in.
Yes. Or send a fax to the...
I mean, there were no mobile phones. It was just like, I'll see you in Games Workshop at 3 o'clock.
I wrote the letter to, what were they called? The Rules Boys. They called them that. And it was about, and I asked them questions like, can a steam tank reverse and that kind of stuff. And it was about, I asked them loads of questions and they actually replied, and they went on for like 4 pages with all of this. Of this stuff.
And sometimes they used to print the answers in White Dwarf, didn't they?
Or the Citadel Journal. They put the
or the journal. So that was kind of interesting that they literally had to supply that there was this sort of judgment arbitrator team, and I'm sure they probably gave out different answers to different people, but no one cared because everyone played in their little communities, and this kind of idea of there being this nationalized rule set that was the same for everyone just kind of didn't exist.
I remember writing into the rules guys as well.
Okay.
When I was like 11 years old or something. And I didn't write my name, or I didn't write a return address on the letter. I just assumed it'd be printed in White Dwarf, and they'd have my answer there.
I did include a return address, so they never
Yeah.
replied, presumably, to you.
They didn't know.
I asked them lots of weird questions as well in that letter about things from Third Ed. I asked them questions like, what does the palanquin of Nurgle do? And I asked them what are the rules for the Bretonnian war machines and these kind of things. So that was quite strange, and they mostly just refused to answer those questions, mainly because they were kind of impossible to answer, really. But yeah, no, that was strange. But I think that the kind of core feeling of this is just that there's just this, a huge disturbance in the force, and all of this stuff. And it's a lot of change, and it's kind of almost a bit too much to handle, really, all at once. But that's what's going to happen.
And looking at the calendar of events for next year, we can see that there's events already in the diary for 8th edition, still going strong. London Legends, of course, being one of them, and the Cardiff Crusade in March, and a few one-day events as well. But there's also a few old events that are already in there. I know Triple Crown are running one in May, I believe it is, which I think might be sold out already.
It was.
It's already sold out. It's sold out very quickly. Cardiff will be running one as well. So yeah, I think there are a few others as well from people who haven't traditionally organised them.
The
as
Honest
well.
Wargamer keeps talking about they're going to run one. Is it early April or something like that?
Yeah. Okay. I don't think there will be a shortage of events for people who want to play Old World to choose from. It's not like it will be with 8th, where there are some people who would probably, who almost like me, who almost go to pretty much every 8th event and wish there were more. So I don't think there will be that dynamic this time. I'm sure there will be, more than enough opportunities.
Well, there might even be Games Workshop events about it, right? I mean,
exactly. I mean, if the official organizer starts getting involved, then then everything kind of changes. I mean, we're assuming that the main source of them are the people, who are organizing 8th events, and that's just not going to be true, is it? There are going to be mega new kids in town that are going to land and presumably be the big beasts, although I don't know.
But I think, and we were saying this offline again, that this Triple Crown event with using the Old World rules, it's almost like there is an inherent risk to obviously running an event for a game that hasn't come out yet, but at the same time, that kind of makes it like there's no risk, because there's no real expectation on Triple Crown to make it balanced or to provide for people who don't have the right bases or whatever. So that in a sense, people are just turning up and just playing the game and having fun and just see what happens, and no one's got any high expectations about it, and so it should be. I think
they've been quite smart on how they've done it, because they've done it as not their main GT, which is normally the first one. They've done it as the other one, so they can kind of test the water.
Yeah, but also because their Derby one was win, lose, draw, wasn't it? And so they want to have the new game as win, lose, draw, because that will probably be how it is in the rulebook.
Really? That would be interesting. I don't know. I mean, whether they go to a 20-0 scoring system or not. I don't know. Maybe Mark, whether competitive 6th or 7th used a 20-0 scoring system, because I don't know the answer to that.
Remember, I did go to a few events, but I mean, that was 20 odd years ago. So I can't remember.
Because in theory, the 20-0 scoring system, you could use that on any edition of Warhammer Fantasy. You could. So I don't know whether they use that or not, because I do think that has some quite interesting dynamics. I mean, as those who have the sort of been to the kind of derby, win, loss, or draw, where you need to only have 100 VPs more than your opponent, that does change the dynamics quite a lot. In favor of certain sorts of kind of lists, sometimes ones that have a lot of high maneuverability and can just go in there and kill a thing and then retreat. It can create some quite strange games, actually, straight win, lose, draw, not necessarily always in a good way, I hasten to add. So, that
you
will
can get skewed lists, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So, I don't know whether that will happen there, and it will be interesting. But I think, though, a general kind of, sort of point is, it seems as though, there are still a few 8th edition events kind of happening, and obviously London Legends is one of these as well. And so I do think it's healthy that there's not, just a complete scramble for the exit door before the new game is even out. At the end of the day, it's not been released. All we have is some rumors and things, and it's new and it's exciting, but
and
8th
we
edition is
talked.
still a fantastic game. And
We talked about whether we should do Old World. We
We
did
did
have
indeed.
serious consideration about it, but at the end of the day, we don't know the rules yet.
Yeah, we
So-
don't know the rules, and I think that there's something to be said for creating, because one thing I think is quite important and that I'm in a sense quite passionate about is the legacy of 8th edition. So a lot of people might probably play 8th now because it was the last known good configuration of the game. It doesn't have that historical deliberate niche in history land like 6th edition currently does. So when the Old World comes out, then 8th is no longer the kind of current edition, which is had in a sense by dint of being the last one before the world blew up. So then what happens to it? Does it just simply fade into history and no one plays it, or does it get its own little niche? And I would like it if it got its own little niche. And so that's why I think it should be given an opportunity to find its place in history. And so if everyone just moves away immediately, I'm not sure it's so easy for it to do that. So, there's a little bit of sentimentality for me there. But I would like it to, get that kind of opportunity to, to set itself, in the historical timeline and, maybe still be played, or not. Depends what the community think. But they should be, given the opportunity to decide.
Yeah, I think a lot of people share that view. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know we do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there will be a certain test there, and I mean, it may be that some people get back into Warhammer in the Old World and start playing, and there will be a certain group of them probably that won't like certain aspects of it or won't like the metagame. And some of them may still want to keep playing Warhammer, and then they've sort of got, in a sense, a choice. Do they go over to the 9th Age, or do they go into 8th edition? And so I do think paradoxically there is a possibility that 8th edition might actually survive, and maybe at a similar level to present, simply because the Warhammer community has been expanded so much that any kind of dissident group that goes back into 8th edition might more than replace people who just jump out of 8th edition into the Old World. And so I do think the future is uncertain, even for Old Hammer, as I suppose you could kind of call it, which I suppose it will be, or at least retro Hammer, or out of production Hammer, or Oop Hammer.
Absolutely. So when I go to an Old World event and I'm up against a young 23-year-old player there, and he sees my old metal models and my little spacers around my movement trays and everything, and I can say, well, actually, this belongs to an older time, and I can evangelize about 8th edition and Old Hammer.
Yes, and a certain minority of them might be quite curious about that. Some of them won't be, and they'll just think, what's this? It's old guy walking in with his, with his flares and all the rest of it, and his age of rock and roll. I know I'm not interested in that. But some of them might be quite interested and think, okay, what was it like in the oldie day? So I do think that's true. There is that, especially if you're on spacer trays with old models, it is going to look pretty weird when you rock up to that. I suppose it's a little bit like, driving something like a Morris Minor into a car park or something like that, and you're getting out with your bowler hat on, you think, okay, you're sort of living in another era here. It's a car and it's got you here, but it's also a bit strange as well. And some people might be quite curious about it. Others won't be, but so again, there's an opportunity, I suppose, there to go back in time if you like the idea of doing that.
There's elements of 8th we don't like as well, which is why we've mentioned one of them, Purple Sun. I think that's everybody's lack of interest on that one, and that's one of the reasons why we've changed things.
I wonder if Purple Sun will still be in the new game. I think it's kind of funny if it is, and it's still an OP spell, because Purple Sun was also the best spell in 4th Ed as well. That's the other thing with it. So it would be quite funny if Purple Sun managed to make people blame the whole magic system because they didn't like Purple Sun, and then it gets away scot-free. And maybe it appears in the Old World. Maybe you need like a 6/6 to cast it or something, and it's just still as filthy as it was before. And then the meta becomes about taking all of the magic items that make it easier to cast that spell.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then Purple Sun, as I say, it's just really funny. It's the one that's to blame, and it's watching the old magic system be taken up to the guillotine and beheaded. And it's probably just saying, yeah, down with the traitor. And then, it's going to wheel out and, just be as disgusting as before. We know that Dwellers is still in because they mentioned that in the last article, but they haven't mentioned Purple Sun. They haven't mentioned Purple Sun yet.
Well, Did they actually mention it as a spell though, or were they just throwing back a reference to
No,
dwellers?
they said, well, in Warhammer the Old World, your Black Orcs might face the dwellers
Okay.
below or something. So that there are dwellers below does exist. But the Purple Sun is clearly the one with the most notoriety because I say it was the best spell in an older edition as well. That's why it's amusing. And it's, it's almost, it's not part of, I think, any of the, I don't know if anyone's written any lore about the Purple Sun. It's got like a description, I think, on the old card of what it is. And yet for something that's so dominant on the tabletop, it's almost just this unknown entity. And I just find it kind of really funny that's what a lot of the tabletop game is, just a spell. No one knows.
And no one knows how to pronounce the full name.
I don't know.
Well, no one knows how to pronounce the full name, do they?
No, as I say, I've heard it called the Purple Sun of Xerox a few times, which is, like an old thing that used to be a photocopier. I think it says on the 4th card who Xurius was and what the origin of the Purple Sun was. I think it's got something to do with an experiment in a tower going wrong or something like that. But it's probably not very substantiated.
What I like about 4th edition, though, was you actually got the card counters for all the different spells, and you could see what it actually looked like visually.
Yeah, that's true. Like, even though it was the same 3-inch template, there was like a actual purple orb.
Yes, I forgot about
which
that.
I think people should still use, to be honest, because it looks a lot cooler than the generic stone thrower template. It's actually this purple, threatening-looking blob that kind of destroyed you. Yes. So I think the Purple Sun might be back. That would be interesting. I don't think they will bring it back. I think that they'll say no Purple Sun, but they brought back Dwellers, so who knows?
And Glittering Robe.
Yeah, and Stormcall. That was a spell in 4th ed as well. Yeah, they like using old titles for things. They've always tended to do that, and I quite like that. There are all these little sort of callbacks to the past, even if it's just in the names of magic items and things. They've always been quite sort of historically sensitive there, and they seem to be doing that kind of sort of again. All these just
little, like the
Falcon Horn. Yeah.
The
Falcon Horn, just these little things that almost probably few people would realize that, but there are those just little consistencies there. It might just be they're too lazy to think of new names, but
maybe this will be the edition where having a magical horn is actually worth it.
Yes, magical.
That'll be the new meta. Magical horn, not standards.
Yes. Do you remember the Horn of Urgok? That was in the Warhammer box set in 4th ed, the Horn of Urgok. That was quite good, I think. It just made everyone take panic tests within 24 or something. I mean, that's horrible. Anyway, who knows? So it's all to play for, and lots of interesting stuff.
We've got 8th edition events in the calendar as well. Cardiff in March. Are you going to that, Luke?
Yes, I will go. I will go to Cardiff. I'd like to win an 8th edition event while they're still there. I would really
rather than being the perennial runner-up.
Well, yeah, I have improved. As I say, I was 4th for a long time, and now I'm getting into the that. But I still haven't won an event. I'd really like to. So I don't know why. I would just quite like to. So I've probably not. I don't know how many more opportunities I'll get, but So I'll go to Cardiff definitely.
It looks like they've changed the pack a little bit, so they're going down to 2,400 points. And it's 25% Lords and Heroes this time instead of 50%.
Really? I didn't realize they were going down to 2,400 points, because that's what it used to be in the old ETC days, I think.
Yeah, it's because it was 600 across the board. It made it easier.
Makes the calculations a bit easier, right?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Normally, it's always people want to bring more toys to the party. They don't want less. So yeah,
I don't mind it. Well, like sometimes we've done a few smaller little things we've gone to, and they've done like 1,600 or 1,800, and it just makes you have to really think about your list a bit more.
I think smaller games are really good, actually. I think some people sometimes say, 8th ed doesn't scale well, but I don't know. I think it's maybe better than people think. I just don't think people play as many small games of it. I mean, the small games I played the 1,000-point games of 8th ed. They're really. I think different armies would be better at different points values, though. I think, like with Warriors of Chaos, I think on small games, I think they're really quite good.
I think I'm in the camp that I don't think 8th scales that well at that points level. I don't know. I just think that you need a cap on the unit size or the unit cost or something like that, because I think, if you're taking a horde that's like 450 points or something, 500 point unit, when you scale it down to an 1800 point game, you're still going to take that big horde at the same size. You're not going to scale down all your units. You're just going to take one of them away. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but it also throws caps on characters at that level as well. So you can't take as many toys, and you have to really think about it. It's I quite enjoy it.
But you could still feasibly run a Death Star. So long as you could afford each component and the Death Star came out of your core, then in theory you could have a 1-unit army. Whether that would be that good, I don't know. It might be really good. I just don't know. I mean, it's because the meta at small points values has never been tested. But anyway, look, it's only an 100-point change in this card. So I don't think it's going to have a particularly big kind of effect.
But the 25% Lords and Heroes, I think, I never went to the event before when it was 50%. And actually, I feel a lot more comfortable with the 25% Lords and Heroes. Not that I'm against for fun, playing a game where it's Teclis and Ilario in the same army.
Yeah,
but
I played that in a practice game.
Okay.
To be honest, I didn't think it was that effective because they sort of do, there's still only 2d6 worth of magic. So, you've both of them. There was a 3 Bloodthirster army, I think.
Wasn't that Max?
Yeah. Exactly. I don't think he had great success with it, to be honest. But I don't know. I mean,
hat off for doing it.
Yes. I mean, when I saw that list, I thought, bloody hell, I'm not going to want that. I mean, really, God. What were some other really stupid lists that they had? I think
wasn't there one with like 5 Frost Hearts?
Yeah.
That was Mark, wasn't it?
Yes, but again, that's not very good because the Frost Heart isn't that good on its own. It's good because it supports things. That's why I think there's a Chaos one that I saw that was really silly because at that level you can have the Disc Lord with the 3-up, rerolling 1, the Demon Prince as well, and a Chimera. Oh, and maybe a monster out of Arcanum and some Skull Crusher. And so you've got, never mind your core, you've essentially got 4 or even 5 flying things that are all really powerful. And that's really weird because there are very few models on the table.
I think I think it was a chap called Andrew did really well, or Andy did really well with the double Doom Ball list. I think came second or something because everyone loves double Doom Ball.
Can you not squeeze that into 25%?
He probably had other stuff as well. So
well, also Beastmen were being allowed 2 750 points and being given +1 and 3 marks and stuff in the last one in Cardiff, which was really too much.
I wouldn't complain.
No, that was getting really a bit silly by that point. The number.
I remember seeing one list which had the very killy Vampire Lord and Manfred and a Necromancer.
Yeah,
which seemed pretty strong. Yes.
I do think strange things do happen. I mean, as a Bretonian, 50% Lords is interesting because you can have the Green Knight and a HKB Lord and a Prophetess and maybe another kind of Lord as well. Actually, you can plausibly have that, and that does change things a lot, especially because you can have the Green Knight and a proper Lord. You don't have to have a Leadership 8 General.
It's funny though, but I mean, we're used to playing. For the last 10 years at the club, we were doing 50% Lords and Heroes. So, I mean, nobody went stupid because it's fairly casual. But being able to have both a Doom Ball, Beast Lord, and a Great Bray in your list just feels nice.
I think it helps some armies more than others. Definitely,
yeah,
the 50% Lord thing.
I mean, the dwarves, for example, most armies don't have Lords anyway, so it's no difference.
Exactly, and you're already allowed 50%. Oh, because the existing rules, 50% Lords and Heroes, you can't have more than 25% heroes either. So is that right? I think so with the existing rules. I think that's correct. But you can have
25% Lords and 25% heroes.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you can have 25%. Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah.
Because the 50%, you can also have 50% heroes as well, conceivably, which also might be quite interesting with certain kinds of things. But again, I've not really seen that before. So I think Cardiff is more of a bit of a wild experimental laboratory, really, because they're much more, I think, a bit more. How can I put it? Experimental. That's probably the diplomatic way of putting it with their comp pack there, and that has good, good and bad potential ramifications. But it does make it a bit more kind of crazy, I suppose. Which is entertaining, certainly, if nothing else.
Switches up the meta as well.
Yeah,
I think no one really knows, in a sense, what the meta is. I mean, because the last event they did, they had no cap on the plus and minus thing. So, the list that won was plus 26. So that obviously completely changes the meta, because it means you can win an event without going onto the top tables at all. So that, that changes things. Maybe went a bit too far, I think, for many people's tastes, that.
Yeah, having no cap at all, I mean, just allows someone to take advantage of that. But then again, fair play. They found the hole in the way to break the comp, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's been complaining and fearful, terrified of the elf fast cavalrylists on the top tables. Don't go to the top tables.
Yeah.
Stay in the middle. Stay in the middle. And you've got, and you're with your, it's not very good, but at the same time, it's probably not absolutely terrible. And if it faces things that are a bit more maybe predictable, that you might be more likely to find in the middle tables, I guess it might be a bit better. So
yeah. And you went to Canada recently, Luke?
I did. I went to Canada. I never thought I would travel internationally to play Warhammer. I mean, that's pretty damn extreme. So I went to the Square Base GT, which was organized by Val Heffelfinger. And I think it was really interesting because I think in Canada and North America, they've not had regular tournaments in the way we have here in the UK. And, we've got 70 million people in a very small area here. And so I do feel as though we've sort of been able to survive with 8th edition, maybe better than they have there, where people are going to have to travel to get that kind of concentration of players. And obviously this time they were prepared to travel, but that's not been a regular experience since the discontinuation of the old world. So yeah, that was very interesting. They used the Triple Crown comp pack, but a lot of the players there were basically 40k players who actually really quite liked fantasy. And I was told a lot there by people that, well, actually, we really like fantasy and we'd like to keep playing it, but it's not supported, so we play 40k. It goes back to that point that Mark mentioned kind of earlier about the supported thing. So actually, a lot of them would actually quite like to play fantasy, but haven't been because it's not supported. But certainly I thought that when I went there, I decided to pick a very long lance Bretonnian list. I had like 2 15-man lances, and with the HKB Lord as well, and a BSB and stuff. And so it was really, I don't like playing like that, but I thought these guys are going to be playing the meta as of about 2014. So I'm going to face all these Death Stars. So I'm going to bring this unstoppable battering ram if you build up an impregnable gate. And that wasn't entirely what happened, I don't think. It wasn't quite as predictable as I expected in that regard. There were more funky lists. Like there was a dwarf list there where I don't know what he had, but I'm not sure what the maximum number of gyrocopters and gyro bombers you can bring is, but he pretty much had maxed them out. And it was really
6
just only
for the copters,
it was like,
and 2 for bombers.
Yeah, it was essentially that. It was this flying thing that was really, really peculiar. And I didn't play that, but obviously I would have been absolutely terrible against that with my long lances. Absolutely dire. So there was that. There were also a lot of Skaven, which I was not used to. Maybe 4 or 5 players playing Skaven. And I've almost never played Skaven. And I played one game against them, and I didn't really want to play them again, to be honest with you, after that.
Callum's about the only person I know who plays them.
Yes. But I just think that when those war machines actually function properly, it's pretty horrible, because a lot of them don't allow you any armor save as well. And obviously, if you're Bretonnians and you've got, against, let's say, the Plague Claw Catapult, say, which it ignores your armor, and you auto take a panic test if it does any damage. That's pretty horrible. The Warp Lightning Cannon against a big, long motorway lance.
Yeah.
That's literally just absolutely absurd.
The motorway lance.
Yeah, but it's what it is. It's like, because literally he shoots down it like a cannon and then it explodes and hits. He can hit.
Yeah.
I don't know, like 12 knights or something with that in one shot, and it can get, it's not always strength 10, but I think it might ignore armor as well. I can't remember.
So was the meta very much Death Star meta or not?
I don't think it was as Death Starry as I expected. There were some things about it, though. The army choices were different. I said there were a lot of Skaven around. There weren't so many elves, only one Warriors of Chaos player. There were 4 Bretonnians, of which kind of I was one. And so the armies that were there were really not what I was expecting at all. I think only one player might have been running Death, so that wasn't there. There wasn't this, predomination of kind of death magic. So I don't think the meta was as evolved. But I do think that the players playing there were in a sense better than I expected, because they were bringing their knowledge of 40k into a fantasy setting. So even though they were kind of rusty on some of the rules, they were still very sharp and switched on about a lot of stuff. And so, so it was an interesting kind of experience from that regard. I thought I would just sweep all the 40k heads away easily, because I just think, their game's got no tactics in it and all the rest. They don't know what they're doing. But I'm not sure that's quite true. I think they do. I think a 40k player can be a pretty good fantasy player if they want to. So I was probably wrong about that.
Yeah, the chap with the 6 gyrocopters, he's on the 8th edition for Life forum, and I was chatting to him about his experience at the GT there. Yeah, it was quite interesting.
I mean, he had some games like against ogres where he just couldn't damage them.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if he'd played Bretonnians, maybe he did play Bretonnians in some games, that would have been fun, I'm sure, for him. Because if he could have parked his gyrocopters on the side of a lance, and it would have, been basically the breath weapon every time. So yeah. I mean, it was held in the Mini Wargaming studios as well.
Yeah.
We watched Mini Wargaming. I got to meet, the dudes from Mini Wargaming. And they were sort of filming. The main guys like Steve and Luca, they didn't end up playing in the tournament. Luca was down to play, and I was down to play him as round 1, but he dropped at the last minute. But they were in the sort of downstairs bit where they have all of the actual studios where they film the battle reports in. I played one of my games in one of those, interestingly.
Cool.
There was one table that they put downstairs, and I was in that for one round, which was kind of cool. And it's just an amazing kind of mecca, really, because you've got, I don't know, like maybe 10 studios on this long corridor with these different kind of themed rooms. One of them that's got like, big marks of chaos on all of the walls, and some of them are more, Age of Sigmar or 40k. And then there's almost like endless, like sort of almost filing cabinet kind of system that goes in the corridor of just all of these armies on boxes, trays and trays of them. And obviously a lot of them are 40k and Age of Sigmar, but there's a lot of fantasy there. And it just felt like this, I don't know, like this almost like, the equivalent of the restaurant at the end of the universe for like fancy. Because also it's in this quite small town as well. And you go there and you go into the bunker, and it's got these studios and this endless, sort of cascade of models. And it did just feel like, wow, this is the center of the earth.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it because, I've been to Warhammer World. Obviously, there's a lot of models there, but it's displays. They're not actually being used for games.
I made a little video of what that bit actually looks like, so I can send it to you, because I was really struck by that.
They've done a few behind the scenes ones where they've walked around, and it is just like metal cases, isn't it? Just open shelves all the way along.
It's intriguing. And I mean, when I met like Steve, he was like, I think he said something like, oh, I've been filming Warhammer reports for like something ridiculous, like 40 of the last 48 hours or something. I mean, because they really work seriously hard in a sense. And I think they almost just, maybe they live underground for periods of time and just play all these games in this kind of bunker. And so it's very, very interesting. But they were really cool. They were really cool guys. There's also a guy called, I think he's called Jackson. He appears in some of their reports. He's more of a kind of casual player, but he was on the sort of the shop front, and they had a little shop there, and he was really cool. Despite being a really young guy, he was also very historically minded as well, and was really interested in like the old editions and that kind of thing. So I do think that they're kind of a pretty cool bunch there. So that extra bit of exotica was also interesting, going to somewhere like that.
I suppose at one point they were pretty much the only ones who were still doing fantasy reports. I know you have Guerrilla Miniatures did who used to be something to do with them as well, but he does a few. But it was pretty much just them, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think they kept it kind of flying. I mean, I think Steve certainly. I think it's his. He said fantasy is my favorite game. So they're definitely doing something interesting there. But I think for them actually making the video content, that's their major kind of source of revenue. There is a small shop there that they have, and they have this obviously this tournament bit which we sort of, I guess, Val rented, and they also have accommodation there as well, which is quite interesting.
I was going to ask, did you stay in the bunkers?
I did not. That was a bit too much. That was a bit too much for me. I'm very into my Warhammer, but actually sleeping in there with a bunch of other kind of nerds on bunk beds. No. I was I was in a 4-star hotel somewhere else. Thank you very much. So I didn't quite go that far. But yeah, they were like, they've got these themed rooms and things in there, and so you can really just you go there and in your big 4x4, and then you go in there and you stay in the place and you just do Warhammer for that time, and then you kind of you go home. It's the North American way maybe of immersing yourself.
What a square base calling it, the fuck bunker.
Well,
is that what they said? But it's interesting what you say about obviously the less densely populated North American continent meant that when the game was discontinued by Games Workshop, it was much harder to get a game in, which kind of makes the name Square Based more understandable in that it's kind of symbolic of we're going back to square bases now from playing round bases.
That's a very astute point, Simon. I agree. I mean, for them, the symbolism of the square base, was just really important. And I mean, for me, it was sort of, I've always been on square based. It's not really very novel for me. So I think that there was the feeling of going back in the time capsule that was very animating for them, and it was it was nice to share in that excitement, even though in a sense I was already kind of in the Stone Age before, and so the fact that they turned up in their time machine was a bit okay. I've been here for a while.
But there wasn't anyone with the with round bases and adapters, no?
I think there was one player, maybe two. I didn't play any of them. But less of that than I was expecting. I thought there would be more of that, to be honest. But a lot of people who played hadn't played literally since for 9 years or something like that, and were like remembering kind of how to play. And so there were some players, like there was a Corn Demons guy called Mitch who I played, and he sensed he was actually quite a really good player, but he was just very rusty. And so it was kind of, in a sense, I thought, oh, well, look, I think I need to just kind of beat you before you remember how to play this game. So, like take advantage of your kind of like vague kind of rustiness. So yeah, it was a really fun, kind of experience actually. And I say the guys there were really, really sort of terrific. And, it was certainly kind of interesting. I mean, I came second in the tournament. I nearly won the tournament. In fact, I had the same number of points as the guy who won. And they used this weird algorithm to differentiate us, which was developed in the 40K world, but I didn't understand. One of the guys who was running the event, actually the TO, was some professional statistician. And so I didn't understand the algorithm he used. But anyway, the algorithm pronounced that I was 0.2 of whatever it was behind the guy who won on this tiebreaker mechanic, which was based on what my opponents had done in their games.
I think basically what it was they looked at what your stats have been so far. I thought, we still can't let this guy win a tournament.
Oh, I still not exactly. So I still couldn't. Yeah, still couldn't win, unfortunately.
They couldn't just have you fly in from another continent and take away the gold. And
well, the guy who did came from Australia, so I guess he already did.
Oh, okay.
Although the prize was like a singing fish, so it was called the Big Mouth Billy Bass, which was on bass, I think.
Yeah.
Something again, that. So it was cool. It was cool to do. I don't know how many more times I'll travel to do it again, but it was interesting to immerse myself in the kind of meta of, insofar as there is a meta, it's probably wrong to say there is, to be honest, or just how things were and how people felt in another part of the world. And I'm sure you'll get that if you went to a lot of different places. So it was a kind of interesting experience in that regard anyway.
Nice.
Yeah, the meta, I think, at least in the UK, you can sort of see it evolving a little bit, at least in the past few years where I've been going to tournaments. And
yeah,
I could tell that Death Stars was definitely part of the meta before I got into the game. Since I've been going to tournaments, Death Stars haven't been that prevalent. I think.
No, I think that's something people should in a sense take note of. And people who say, "Oh, 8th Ed is all Troop Hammer and Death Stars." I don't know about that. I think it may have been for a while, but
it's the obvious choice when it started.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And I can see past battle reports online where it's literally just 2 or 3 hordes on each side, and you think, wow, that's a real sort of
like something like 40 Chaos Warriors or something, which is obviously a really suboptimal unit because they're on really big bases and they, there's only one supporting attack kind of coming back, and so it's just not really that great. I think giving Bretonnians Devastating Charge kind of slightly helped actually reduce a bit of that, because with Dev Charge, the longish Bretonnian Lance can often breaks a unit steadfast, and then if it's not stubborn generically, I think the units that are stubborn generically have kind of stayed in Death Stars, but the ones that aren't stubborn generically maybe have fallen away a little bit. Because I'm thinking about the really big units. The Lion Star is the obvious really big one that you still get, and that's clearly a good Death Star, and it's stubborn. And I think those things are related. The Witch Elves aren't stubborn, but at the same time, they don't really lose combat unless they're hit in the flank.
And their core.
Their core. And because of the actual cauldron, you only need about 30, 35 of them to get a horde that's effective.
Less, I think.
Yeah.
Cauldron's huge. Maybe I think as few as 27.
27, I think it is, something weird like that.
You don't need so many. That's true. If I played Dark Elves, I would play small units of 10 Witch Elves, maybe with the Shadow Wizard. I think there's much. I don't know that you need the Cauldron to reroll everything. I think they're good enough as it is, man. I mean, I just think there's a lot to be said for that. But there was a guy who I played he was the guy, he calls himself Frodo. He's the guy who used to bring the -26 host of the Eternity King list to the Triple Crown. And he played some Dark Elves against me that were, I think it was 4 units of 10 Witch Elves, 4 Pegasus, 4 Bolt Throwers, a Marathi, and some Warlocks or something. I think it was about -12 or 13 or something on the Triple Crown comp. That was pretty nasty. So some quite, I think in the day before the comp system, that I think if you really, really push stupidly hard, I think Dark Elves and Warriors of Chaos are absurd. If you really don't, because you can get with Warriors of Chaos, you can get down to about -20 or something on the comp system if you really want to optimize it. And that's like especially with 50%, it's like double Demon Prince or Demon Prince and double Demon Prince, 3-up rolling 1 BSB, 2 Chimeras, Throg, and some Trolls. That's sort of the army. It's probably about -15 actually, and that's obviously really stupid.
But so we've also seen the meta kind of move to these big monsters and having kind of lists that are based around multiple attacking threats with big monsters. And maybe it's because artillery was getting less common, and so
although that's started to change, hasn't it, as of the last big GT, which they did.
Well, that's right, yeah, because not only are people taking more artillery, but also taking more cavalry and things like that. And people forget that you got a bit of, because cavalry aren't that popular traditionally for 8th edition. Monsters actually, they can't thunderstomp them, and if they get caught out and they get charged by a bunch of lances, even if it's not Bretonnians, they can still fall.
Yeah, they can, unless it's the really stupid monsters from Monstrous Arcanum that just thunderstomp everybody. And that's where the evolution, but there are only a couple of them. I think it's Monstrous Arcanum and Storm of Magic have definitely changed it, because there are some really good big monsters that are definitely like the Magma Dragon, for example. I mean, I think in one of the Cardiff there were 5 of those flying around, and that's the really good one.
Is that the one we've banned?
No, I don't think it's where the real stupid one is. That Warp Fire Dragon is the stupid one, but also because its rules are so stupidly written as well. The Warp Fire Dragon is obviously completely abusable. In a sense, it's not available to that many armies though. Whereas the Magma Dragon, I think they let anyone have that.
Strength 5 breath weapon is really ugly though.
The greater one has a Strength 7 breath weapon.
Yeah.
That's only the young one that has a Strength 5 breath weapon.
Oh wow!
The greater one it has Toughness A. It reduces your strength by 1. However, you know, it's still only, I don't think it has that many attacks, and it can't thunderstomp everything. So it's not, I don't think it's necessarily super amazing. I mean, it's not good against, I mean, obviously it's not good against war machines. The only really silly monster, as I've kind of complained about before, is the Kenrick Titan, which is clearly obviously ridiculous from first principles, because that doesn't have any weaknesses at all, apart from the fact that it's in Tomb Kings. Which is it. Shall we talk a bit about London Legends, guys? Because you know, that's another thing we wanted to do on this call, because, you know, London Legends is back. Hey, happy days.
Well, just a quick segue to that. Just because we were talking about the meta, obviously the last year at London Legends, the top three winners, first, second, and third place, none of them had a Death Star. And the first and second place were sort of fast cavalry based lists. And I suppose you could say that's part of the meta now, in a way.
I think it was, going way back, part of the meta that kind of got forgotten. I think fast cavalry avoidance lists, Dark Elf and Wood Elf, not High Elf. High Elf isn't as good at it, but those two was, I think, definitely a powerful kind of build.
Yeah.
And the way of beating that is small arms shooting. And if players don't have that much of that, then it's, you know, it's really difficult to do much about. That's certainly true.
Yeah, crossbows, handguns, that sort of thing.
A normal kind of Wood Elf list, conventional Glade Guard Wood Elf list, that's going to absolutely destroy a fast cavalry list. Iron Lead Belchers are really good against it. Iron Drakes would be another one that are really good. And organ guns and volley guns, of course, as well. So there are some. Again, it's the meta game, though. If there's not that many of those things about, you know, then and everyone's taking big monsters or Death Stars or whatever, then your fast cav aren't going to have too many problems. And you put objectives in, which of course they have in Cardiff and we have in London Legends. You know, the fast cav become more powerful. Although that's something we've actually changed in London Legends, because we've got an amendment to the rules where we're only allowing one fast cavalry unit to score, with the possibility of a second one if you put your BSB in that unit, rather than allowing all fast cavalry units of 10 models or more to score, which hopefully won't, you know, will mean it's not just a repeat of what's been the case at the last few Cardiff events and our event as well, with fast cavalry kind of basically dominating.
Yeah, so that's been a bit of a nerf to the fast cavalry list. But
it's whether it becomes skirmishers with standards in replaces them.
Are we letting skirmishers score?
I can't remember.
Be it. Yeah, skirmishers can score.
Oh, okay. That would be interesting.
You need 10, don't you, in an infantry unit with a standard power.
Can the Wood Elf Deepwood Scouts take standard? Oh, okay. So they might be quite good. I think Wood Elves generally, I think, with this mission-based thing, kind of become pretty good, to be honest. So I do think that it's the missions as well. I do think that's changed things. So yeah, there will be a little bit of a nerf for fast cav, but at the same time, I still think that if you want to run a fast cav list and you can have 2 scoring options still, I still think you can, you know, do quite a lot with that. However, you won't be able to bring, and you won't face 4 scoring fast cav units. So that will change things a little bit, I think. But I still wouldn't be entirely surprised if a fast cav list wins. I still think that's possible under what we've done. We haven't thrown the book at them like they have at Cardiff, where they've said fast cav can't score and there's no BSB. No. So they've, in a sense, gone completely the other way in a massive swing. Whereas I think we've been a bit more
we don't want to.
We've
tried to sort of follow the Triple Crown ethos of not banning or preventing everything. We're just trying to limit the effectiveness of something which is obviously good.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important not to, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think they should be a legitimate, legitimate part of things. And there are ways of countering them as well. If you want to build your list in that way.
Well, that's it. If you're prepared for it, I mean, any list, if you're prepared for that list, you'll find a way to beat it. But if you're not, and you get caught out, and you've got a bunch of dwarves that can't get across the table quick enough, and they're just going to run around you.
Yeah, of course. I think there were some things that used to exist in 8th Ed that, in a sense, people did feel they had to plan for. And I think one of them was the Wall of Nurgle, for example. But when I've played the game, I've only seen a single player called Matt Pass, who I've never actually played, run the Wall of Nurgle. And so, in a sense, it's not that much of an abundant threat because it's not really there. And of course, the hard counter to Wall of Nurgle is the purple sun. That's it. That's what kills it. And obviously, when there's a lot of purple sun, it becomes a bit of a liability.
Yeah.
So, and that would plus the comp system. But I think it might just, I don't know why I haven't seen more of it. I don't know, it might just be the distribution of players that just for some reason, not so many of those dudes playing 8th edition. But once you've got a lot more people playing the game, as will be the case in Warhammer the Old World, then presumably you will see this meta stuff kind of rise to the top. So you'll encounter it.
Yeah.
So another thing is we've tweaked a couple of the house rules. So we've changed the rules for cannons striking the ridden monsters. So we'll randomize now between the rider and the monster. And the other tweak was, we comped death magic, another plus,
higher.
another -1 for the mounted death wizards or the flying death wizards.
Yeah. I think the monster and rider one is interesting because not only does that make monster and rider more viable, we've also given ridden monsters a rank as well. So they have a bit more potential to break units now. So if you see a unit that's say in 2 ranks, or even 3, your monster goes in there, rider, monster, thunderstomp, and takes that down to, for example, 9 models or something. That's not going to be steadfast now. Because you've got a rank and they've got a rank as well, and so they're not steadfast. So that might change the effectiveness of ridden monsters. I still don't think it's going to make them too powerful. I don't think that, but it might be.
And of course, it doesn't apply to the unridden monsters.
Correct.
Yeah,
but ridden monsters it does. So yeah, it might make them a bit better because I've really almost never seen ridden monsters in 8th. It's just when you consider how prevalent the ridden monsters were in old Warhammer, like the battle reports and White Dwarf and stuff, a ridden monster was often the centerpiece.
Yeah.
And now they're not really there anymore, and it's riderless monsters.
Apart from when you face my Wood Elves. Inevitably, you've got the Eagle Rider.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But is that a monster?
Well, monstrous cav. Close.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, but if you face my
Yeah.
Bretonians, I'm going to have Pegasus. I think the only thing...
Oh, I did bring those... Griffin.
Yes. One guy who I played in the Canada thing had a Bretonian Lord on a Hippogriff, which is pretty cool. Which is, again, like an almost never selected thing. It's almost as never selected as King Llewellyn Leon Kerr, who, again, never got any pluses in the Cardiff Compact, even when you could take him with 50% Lords. And if you read the rules as written, he's the only knight that doesn't have devastating charge, which I think is just wonderful. He's already terrible, and he's the only knight in all of Bretonia who doesn't know how to do devastating charge. That's just...
The other change we made as well was to Highlander.
Yes.
So if you take Monstrous Arcanum stuff, you can't qualify for it.
Which I think is, again, a more proportionate nerf to that, because Triple Crown have just gone and got rid of Highlander completely. And I think that's a mistake. I like Highlander a lot. Yeah, I've got the Highlander prize here. This is what I was given for winning the Highlander thing at the last GT, the last one ever of these, I guess. But I think not letting people take Highlander if they have a monstrous Arcanum or Storm of Magic is more proportionate, I think, than just banning Highlander. Because I do think that there's something cool about Highlander, especially when they had different pluses for different armies getting Highlander, because it's easier and harder for certain armies to get him.
The art of the nerf.
Yes, the art of the nerf, precisely. Not going too far. In not just being, whoa, that's too good. Bam. That's not allowed. Hopefully this is a proportionate nerf. Sensible, rational, constitutional nerfing of a proportionate kind is what you're going to get from London Legends.
And we followed Cardiff in the sense that we've switched from the 20-0 system to the 17-3 system.
Yeah, like in Ninth Age, you get hard tournament points now for completing missions. And that's nice because it means that, you can't just table your opponent and win. You do have to go for the mission. If you table your opponent, you don't win the mission, it's a 17-3 to you. If you table your opponent and he wins the mission, then it's actually only 14-6 to you, even though that's quite unlikely. But, but still. So I do think that means the missions become even more central. It becomes basically the same as Ninth Age and Cardiff as well. And I do really, really like mission-based games. I do think that then players are playing for the mission from the beginning. You know, it's that important, and it's just nice, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we're back in the Dark Sphere Megastore in Shepherd's Bush in London.
Yeah,
We've got
absolutely.
quite a few of the players from last year, or from earlier this year, I should say, who are coming again, including the first and second place winners from last year. Looking
Yeah,
to
we've got
retain the crown.
yeah.
Yeah, we have Warren Brewster and Mike Sylvester coming. Despite the nerf to kind of fast cavalry, they've been undeterred. They see it in the right way, which is a challenge to them. So they want to, you know, take on the nerf, you know, and still win, which is great. I think that's exactly what you should do.
I think there's a good rivalry between them as well. I'm sure Mike is not happy about the result last year.
Or one of them could just call the bluff of the other person and just bring a list that is anti-fast cav. Right?
There's also Adam Daly as well in here, who's also kind of become a fast cav. This is a man who is able to summon armies, shall we say, on very short notice from I don't know where he gets them from, but they appear quite quickly, and so he's able to play the meta quite well.
I think I played Adam last year as one of the standing games.
He had a Necrofex Colossus, I believe, last year, which I don't actually think is that good. It's not, really, compared to the Kenrick Titan. So there's that, and it's nice to see quite a few players coming back. I mean, hopefully it indicates they enjoyed their experience last time, and they're.
And it's worth saying, actually, some of the players that are coming back are the people who are at both ends of the scale as well. So, obviously that shows that they enjoyed their experience.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that scale that you sort of alluded to there. I mean, there are a lot of players that come to these tournaments who aren't terribly competitive gamers.
Exactly.
They are playing mainly for fun, and most people are there to have a good time. And even if you are someone who doesn't play the game competitively, just plays at your friend's house casually, come along. You will have some good games. The way that the matches are done means that you won't be playing a pro player for each of the 5 rounds. You'll be matched up against people who have a similar skill level, or at least similar results in the tournament to you. So come on down.
Yeah, exactly. Apart from in the first round where it's random, then it's you will find you get some kind of good games. And I think it's right to say that all kind of not all skill levels were represented exactly, but there was a very kind of wide spectrum, including people who are quite, rusty about the rules.
Some people who were new to it almost last year. So
yeah, and that's important, and that's part of the, that's kind of part of the kind of community, and needs to be, kind of recognized, and it's nice that we kind of had them in there as well. There's one player who's bought a ticket, Dominic Pemberton, is an old kind of pro player who hasn't played for 9 years. Who I've been talking to him on Facebook, and I played him for the first game in kind of 9 years a few weeks ago. We played it on the realm of, it's called the Realm of Battle or something. It's this, Mark might know, it's this 6-piece modular board that
the one where it just slides if you've got the because it's got the hills built in.
Yeah, it's got built-in hills, so you have to have it. So unless you have one hill in basically the middle of the table, you put the hills on all of the sides. Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
It looks really cool, but if you've got like trays on it, they can slide.
Yeah. This happened to my lance formations. It was a kind of like a slalom. We did.
So they did look amazing, but maybe not very practical.
No, I might get one of those actually. I was quite inspired by it, because I like battlefields that have got actual texture on them. I think they look really, really nice.
I love the old Perry twin dioramas which they had with all they just look awesome.
There are some some of those that just appeared in old white, or especially with some of the old buildings. There's one that I really like. I think it's like a tavern, and there's one that's got a kind of a water wheel on it as well. It's just, they're just lovely. Some of those are buildings, but because they were really, really into making terrain and making it look quite historical and quite Middle Earthy. And I like that more than the more high fantasy kind of buildings, like the really massive tower and all the ruins and stuff. That's always been a little bit too I know it's not Age of Sigmar, but it's always been a bit Age of Sigmar for me. And I like, I like the the prancing pony and that kind of stuff. I like the Tolkien-y kind of feel of Warhammer.
That's what I like. I like the old, actually that's one. I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a digression here. But if they do, as part of the old world, bring out like the old, was it fortified manor and the chapel and all of that? If they bring all of that out again, I will be a happy bunny. I love that stuff.
Yeah. No, it was kind of really, really cool. Do you have the old fortress, Mark? The old what was called the mighty fortress?
I have. But I haven't. I've got the second edition one, which is the plastic one. I haven't got the foam one.
Foam.
The original one for like third edition was a foam fortress.
Wow, that's like a legend. That's maybe from the same place as the polystyrene Blood Bowl pitch.
Oh, polystyrene. That's it. Maybe it was that or something. Oh, I've got that as well.
Really? Wow. God, man, that's pretty. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Blood Bowl's always been my jam.
Yeah. Anyway, so there will be some, some players at that maybe haven't been playing for a while and stuff. We seem to have this kind of ability to get these dudes you haven't played for a long time to come back.
Yeah, Dominic messages me as well for a game. I haven't been able to schedule it yet, but hopefully I'll give him a game before the tournament.
Yeah.
We've also got some people. There's a couple of guys coming from Germany, and there's one guy who's coming all the way from Finland as well.
That's very exciting.
To come to the tournament, so that's exciting. Yeah.
Oh, who's coming from Finland? It's not any of the ones who've got their own channel as well, like any of the 10 Island Wargamers or anything, is it?
I think they're all in Sweden. Those guys, aren't they?
They are. The miscast table dudes are Swedish.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We should send a message to those guys, because I remember they're always saying they want to come to England for a tournament. We'll try and get them to London.
I quite like their channel, I have to say. I think they're very precise and very kind of polite and stuff. And
which one, the miscast or the 10 Island?
10 Island, I don't know. No, the miscast. The
miscast. I really enjoy their content. 10 Island Wargaming are really good. Sorry, just going off on another tangent. 10 Island Wargaming are really good for their battle reports. They're really precise. They're really competitive. There's one of the chaps who's on 8th edition for a bit as Azario or something, and I think he's a really good player from what I understand, at least in the local meta over there.
I think there are a lot of good players in Scandinavia, actually. It's relative to the population of those countries. There's a lot. I know that Ninth Age is really strong in those countries. Again, I don't know why exactly this is. Ninth Age is in the UK for some reason is really weak, but in some in the Scandinavian countries, in Germany, in Poland, really big.
Wasn't it the Swedish comp guys who pretty much drove the start of it?
Well, it's called Swedish comp for a reason.
Exactly.
But I never thought of it like that. But yeah, I don't know. That is interesting. So yes, it'll be interesting to see who kind of rocks up. And it's nice that people are still want to play 8th edition, even in the big changing world of powerful and unpredictable events.
That's right. Yeah. So I'll put a link, as I said before, in the description below. Download the comp pack. You can always send us an email at londonlegendswarhammer@gmail.com, or at least join the Facebook event page as well. Stick a message on there and we'll get back to you ASAP.
We got stuff on the 8th edition for Life Forum, which we're pretty active on as well. So yeah, get to us anyway.
Yeah, so it'll be kind of interesting in a sense that you'll be playing 8th edition after the Old Worlds has come out. So in a sense, you'll be playing, Old Hammer in a manner of kind of speaking. But maybe people who come to the tournament might have played a few Old World games by then, and then they'll have a chance to jump back into 8th edition. And so I do think that one thing I'm sure people will talk about there, will be 8th Ed versus the Old World. And if you like that conversation, you're interested in having that conversation when there's actually proper information about it as well, then I'm sure it will be a really, really good place to dial into that whole discussion with. And I'm sure everyone will have their opinions, and that's one of the kind of things I'm kind of quite looking forward to about it, because it will be with people who know both systems, most likely, in most cases, I imagine. Whereas with some of the old world events that are kind of born old world, I think a lot of the players going to that will presumably maybe not play 8th edition. I don't know. So yeah.
That's right. Don't rebase just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not. Oh yes, and we are not allowing, big base stuff in our tournament. If that was a kind of FAQ, can I buy my old world models on their expanded bases? No, you can't.
Well,
not allowed, which is what it said in the 3rd ed rulebook when there's this like just random skirmishing formation. It just says not allowed, and then a square, and it says allowed.
A big no.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. That's like on page 1. This is a formation, and this isn't.
Yes.
Now we're going to tell you about the rest of the game. That would have been the first thing I would have put in every Warhammer rulebook. And then we wouldn't had Age of Sigmar or any of that kind of nonsense. Not allowed as well. I like that. Yeah, you got it right. Not allowed. No.